If you know anything about the church calendar, the liturgical church calendar for which other denominations follow each week, as Baptists, we don't have to do that. We kind of pick up on that, on the rhythms of church life, but we don't have to do that. We have that freedom. But I'm aware that it is still the season of Christmas. Yeah, it's the official church season is still Christmas. So this is the second Sunday of Christmas. So we kind of continue with part of the Christmas story. But we're sort of for most of us, we're in a post-Christmas kind of state of mind now. Maybe where we're making those resolutions that we are going to eat less of that stuff or do more of something that's good, but, it's been put off a bit by the weather and things like that. Or where we're just all those different things that we put off until after Christmas. Now we're having to pick up on, we're having to actually follow through with those. And sometimes for some of us, not all of us, but Christmas might have been a lovely time, or maybe we can think of times when Christmas has been really good, but then it's a real struggle for us to get back into just real life again, back into work or school or college or simply the same old routine when there are less people around. In our family, we have a bit of a standing joke about my brother-in-law, Robert, who the first time in 1975, the Christmas of 1975, Bob, as we used to call him then, now he's gone posh, we call him Robert. Bob turned up with my sister, Nikki, who's now also gone posh, who's now called Nicola. I think that happens when you get older in life. It was the first time he'd come to our house, and we thought he was just staying kind of Christmas Day, Boxing Day, maybe the day after that, and then he'd go back to his family. Instead, I think we got to around this time of year, and he was still with us. My sister was still there. It wasn't really weird that he just stayed on, but he'd kind of pretty much moved in for quite a substantial chunk of January. I'm sure it's because of the first flush of love, because my sister is so lovely and he was so in love with her. But I also think part of it was he didn't want to go back to the reality of his life of being a local government officer in Wellingborough in Northamptonshire. And he was just kind of wanting it to continue and continue. And we tease him about this, the fact that we couldn't get rid of him. We did in the end, and we welcome him in, and I love him like a brother. I've obviously known him for a long time now. We do think that part of it was just that he wanted to continue the Christmas vibe as long as he could and not get bogged down into the reality. It can be quite hard for us to move on and to kind of find a mood shift, a gear change, a different kind of a vibe. And that's what we see with what happens in Matthew's Gospel, where we suddenly move from the cozy Christmas card kind of images of Jesus in the manger, the shepherds and the angels and the star and the wise men are coming and they've got their inappropriate crowns on and all of this kind of thing. And there are oxen and all sorts of things, lovely things happening everywhere. It's really beautiful, and for some reason there are robins and snow involved as well. And then we move in Matthew's Gospel to what we've heard this morning in Matthew chapter 2. And this episode that occurs, which becomes something of a reality check for all humankind, which becomes a different vibe, a different feel, a definite kind of post-Christmas thing, but actually which is a whole part of it as well. I'm going to read again from Matthew chapter 2, verse 13, but I'm going to carry on with the story, the rest of that chapter. So I'm reading from Matthew chapter 2 and verses 13 onwards. After they had left, that's the wise men, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph and said, Herod will be looking for the child in order to kill him. So get up, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt and stay there until I tell you to leave. Joseph got up, took the child and his mother and left during the night for Egypt, where he stayed until Herod died. This was done to make come true what the Lord had said through the prophet, I called my son out of Egypt. And then moving on from verse 16 onwards. When Herod realized that the visitors from the east had tricked him, he was furious. He gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its neighborhood who were 2 years old and younger. This was done in accordance with what he had learned from the visitors about the time when the star had appeared. In this way, what the prophet Jeremiah had said had come true. A sound is heard in Ramah, the sound of bitter weeping. Rachel is crying for her children. She refuses to be comforted, for they are dead. After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go back to the land of Israel, because those who tried to kill the child are dead." So Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and went back to Israel. But when Joseph heard that I can't say that name. Archie, I'll call him Archie. But when Joseph heard that Archelaus had succeeded his father Herod as king of Judea, he was afraid to go there. He was given more instructions and a dream, so he went to the province of Galilee and made his home in a town named Nazareth. And so what the prophets had said came true. He will be called a Nazarene. So in all of this, what we have is a mood shift, a gear change, a different vibe. As I said, not the stuff of Christmas cards. King Herod, to say the least, is pretty peeved that he has been misled, left hanging by the wise men who bypass Jerusalem as they make their way home from paying homage to Jesus. But the damage is done. Herod orders infanticide. He commands that all boys that would fit in the age range of Jesus are to be murdered. And God intervenes. Once again, by way of a dream, Joseph is prompted to take himself and Mary and Jesus away from the area to safety in Egypt, where they take up home for a while until it is safe for them to return. So where do we begin to make sense of all of this? What can we learn from this whole unsavory episode? I think overall it tells us about the enduring nature, the long-lasting and nasty stain of human wickedness that finds its expression in the abuse of power, in the exercise of oppression, in the practice of evil. The whole of this section of Scripture speaks into many a context now that we find ourselves in and that we see around us and that we are connected with. Firstly, we see that Jesus was a refugee. And so we have to consider and relate that to our context now and how refugees are regarded by so many people. Probably in the mainstream, certainly within most of Europe and in the US. Because now, Jesus and his family would probably be turned away. Because now, Jesus and his family, well, Jesus wouldn't, he was a baby, but Joseph and Mary would be interviewed, held for hours, interrogated, presumed guilty until proven innocent, unlike the rest of English law. They would maybe be put in a hotel or soon in an army camp, in a disused army camp. They would be faced by protesters outside and all sorts of hostile misinformation on social media, in mainstream news, by politicians, just by people on street corners. They might be sent to a different country, wherever a deal could be struck with that particular country. I've lost track of which countries we're currently doing deals with, where our government wants to send people who have come here seeking safety. And if this were today, and Jesus and his family were coming here, then neither Joseph nor Mary would be allowed to work. No matter what skills they brought, no matter how badly we might need carpenters. And they would be viewed as a problem. I think it's really important for us to hold on to these thoughts in the context that we find ourselves in the political situation that we find ourselves in, to remember that the one that we worship, the one who is the Son of God, was in this very situation that people who are in today are so maligned. And we see that Jesus is the refugee seeking safety. The United Nations High Commission for Refugees say that currently 1 in 70 people on this earth has been forced to flee for safety, whether that be because of conflict, whether that be because of famine or other reasons to do with climate change and so on, whether that be to do with oppression, injustice. 1 in 70. And there are many people amongst us here now in our church family, in our church community, and many people who access Six Ways for support, who are in this situation, who are, like Jesus, have sought refuge, have sought sanctuary. We are a church of sanctuary. This is one of the reasons why they've sought asylum here in the UK. So a question is, do we see Jesus in those who are fleeing for safety? Or do we just see a problem? And another way in which the story about Jesus and his early life, his very early life, speaks into our context today, our global context, as I say, which we are connected with, is that wherever there is evil oppression going on, we see a connection with what Herod was about, with what was being imposed upon the people in Bethlehem, and which Joseph and Mary and Jesus were caught up in. Wherever we see innocent people being murdered by those pursuing the agenda of hate, we see a connection with this story. The UNICEF executive director, Catherine Russell, said this in October about the situation in the Middle East, in Gaza. She said that in the last 2 years, a staggering 64,000 children have reportedly been killed or maimed across the Gaza Strip, including at least 1,000 babies. We don't know how many more have died due to preventable illnesses or are buried under the rubble. The situation that has been ongoing in Gaza and in Israel is just one example. We just have to be aware of the news at the moment and think how miserable things must be in Kyiv right now. I don't know if the power is still off, but the power was switched off in the midst of a really, really cold winter. They've been pounded and pounded and pounded by Russian artillery, Russian drones this last few weeks as the war continues and people suffer. Well, we should be aware of the situation in Iran, the maybe escalating, deeply troubling situation in Iran. All of the people that have been killed, the distress that has been caused, the people responding to the oppressive regime, reacting against the oppressive regime in Iran. Or to think about, I might not agree, I don't agree with the manner in which it's been dealt with by the Trump administration, but simply to look at the nature of the Maduro administration in Venezuela, the kind of terrible, oppressive regime that he was running. And there are so many other examples too. Not always been carried out by the state, by rulers, but by insurgent groups or simply other people, whoever holds power. And part of the way in which the life of Jesus connects with us and what we see going on around us and what we experience as well is that Jesus has been through this. His family, his community, his culture in which he was born into, in which he lived, have been part of this, have experienced this. And this is one of the reasons why the fact that the Word was made flesh, that Jesus, the Son of God, became a real human being, vulnerable as he was, is so powerful. It's so powerful because it connects us with that and connects him with us. And all of these things are pretty gloomy and troubling for us, aren't they? We need to hold them in our hearts and in our heads, in the face of the rising tide of hate politics that we see around us, spearheaded by the likes of Nigel Farage and Donald Trump, spurred on by summer protests and flag waving, dragging all other politicians and our own views and feelings possibly with them, that the middle ground shifts. These are dangerous, dangerous days. We are all in danger of either being like King Herod or of being perpetrators of the hate, or maybe just apologists for it, or people that ignore it. Or if we stay true to Jesus, we see that we too can become victims of the hatred. But at the same time, rather than sending us all away thoroughly depressed, there is good here. We see the goodness of God. I believe that we see something that is big and beautiful about the way that God works in the world, bringing hope and justice and peace. I believe that we see the goodness of God at work. Evil things happen. People do evil things all of the time, like we see with Herod, like we see with so many awful, abhorrent atrocities in our world. The Bondi Beach attack, the brutal and relentless pounding of Gaza, of parts of Ukraine, the horrible things happening in Sudan, and sadly so many other instances. Well, personally, I don't put these things down to being God's plan. I don't see them as being God testing anyone or causing these terrible things to happen. I believe that they occur because we have free will and because we are in a fallen world where there is spiritual warfare going on. As the Apostle Paul says in Ephesians in chapter 6, "For our struggle is not against enemies of blood and flesh, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers of this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places." As I said earlier, I believe we see something big and beautiful about the way that God works in this world, in what happens in this story, bringing hope and justice and peace. I believe that we see the goodness of God at work. We see signs of hope and justice and peace. We see God's intervention for what is his plan in what unfolds in this story. God communicates with Joseph, alerts him to the danger, and Joseph reacts to this. He takes his family to safety. Verse 13 of chapter 2 of Matthew's Gospel tells us, "After they had left, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph and said, 'Herod will be looking for the child in order to kill him. So get up, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt and stay there until I tell you to leave.'" Again, even when Joseph discovered that Herod had died and it might be good to return home, God intervenes and Joseph modifies his plan to keep his family safe. He was given, verse 22 tells us, he was given more instructions in a dream, so he went to the province of Galilee and made his home in a town named Nazareth. So in spite of all of the horrors and the unfairness of this world, in spite of all of the oppression and cruelty and evil that there is hope. We have a hope. We have this hope that Peter in his first letter calls a living hope. In Jesus, there is a way forward. that is good and true and is the path of peace, the highway for us all to follow, a highway of hope. God's plan through Jesus finds a way through, and now we are part of his plan. God intervenes in this story of Jesus and his family. God intervenes to ensure that the story of salvation continues. Jesus and his family survive, and therefore Jesus grows up to be the teacher, the prophet, the miracle worker, all that he was, and the sacrificial Lamb of God who sets us free from all of these things, who wins the victory, the ultimate victory over the likes of Herod. And God has always been doing this. Hence, there are references to things that have gone before. Hence, there is the reference in verse 14 that Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and left during the night for Egypt, where he stayed until Herod died. This was done to make come true what the Lord had said through the prophet. I called my son out of Egypt. This is a reference back to the Old Testament prophetic book of Hosea, chapter 1. A reminder about God's love and compassion and how that persists and pervades no matter what. And a reminder how God brought his people a way out of oppression, across the Red Sea, out of Egypt, and saved them from another evil, terrible situation. And so too, also the reference to Rachel weeping in Ramah. The sound is heard in Ramah, the sound of bitter weeping. Rachel is crying for her children. She refuses to be comforted, for they are dead. It acknowledges... So Rachel is the mother of Joseph, not this Joseph, the other Joseph, the one with a coat a bit like that one there, multicolored one, and a beautiful coat that he has given. But she's one of the matriarchs of the people of Israel. And in Ramah, that's where the part of the exile for the people of God, the Jewish people, were gathered there before they went into Babylon. But knowing that God brought them back again. God brought them out. So there is pain now, but joy comes in the morning. So Matthew was letting his readers know, those who were in the know then, and we need to work at it a little bit more, that the path for God's people is not smooth. They've been here before, but that God has been here before and will always be here and will see his people through. And God's purposes continue. They continue for us today. They continue for all people today. His plan rolls on. And no dictator, no prime minister, no president, no supreme leader, no evil person can undo that, can overcome that. His plan rolls on and we continue to be part of it. We trust that God will still intervene and that the victory has been won for us on the cross. Our task is to stay faithful. Our task is to continue to pray. Our task is to continue to worship. Our task is to continue to serve, is to continue to cry out and to challenge injustice. And for us to be the way that this works, but through us, welcoming and supporting those that the world wants to turn away, speaking up for justice against the seemingly overwhelming injustice that we face, challenging the narrative of hatred and hostility. This is what we are called to do, remembering that we are called to be Jesus and not Herod.